evening, Patreon. Hope you're well. Hope you're having a fantastic Friday evening. It's certainly close to Christmas, and hopefully you're all excited and you've all been good, and Santa's going to bring you some nice presents. Let me just put that on silent. Done. Guys, let's do a quick housekeeping. Guys, give me a thumbs up if you can see and hear me all okay. Hopefully you can. I can see a lot of people in the building already. Absolutely amazing. Let's just check the comments. We've got a thumbs up from Lisa, loud and clear. Absolutely amazing. Guys, before we get into tonight's live, I just want to give a massive shout out to you as a community. You guys are absolutely amazing. I just want to say the way you guys portray yourself on social media, it's not gone unnoticed. You are portraying yourself what I believe to be in the correct manner. And it's not about me, it's about us as a whole. We have a duty of care, because the more followers we get, the more we're in the limelight, the more we're going to be followed by the people who we don't want them to follow and all that sort of stuff. So holding ourselves accountable is absolutely amazing. So guys, from what I've seen, because I follow most of you, you're absolutely, you're doing an amazing job, as in sort of portraying us as a community. You're doing really well. So I just want to say thank you for everyone's conscious effort with how they're portraying themselves on social media. Absolutely amazing. Guys, very quickly, Ryan, RT, Pythons, Michael, Andy, Steve Walker, Jordan, one half of Jam Genetics. Good evening, Jordan. Ewan McDonald, Kerry Stimson, all the way up there in the sunny Scotland, along with Mr. Walker, Darren, Lisa, Lynn, Casey Royals. Where's everything gone? Oh, God. There we are. Casey Royals, Hybrid Morphs, New Gene Balls, Houston Herbs, Return of the Mac, the other half of Jam Genetics. Good evening. We've got MJ Pythons. Good evening. X Balls. Marv, I know you said you were going out, so I appreciate you jumping on the live, mate. We've got Ashley, we've got Pete Frost, we've got Norfolk Royals, we've got Paul at PMC, we got the other Paul, we got Scott, we got MJ Logo and Designs. Good evening, Mel. We've got James, and I think we've got Scott. Alice is here, Luke's here, everyone's here. I think we're all up to. We've got Perfect Pythons. Good evening. Candy Mania's in the house. Dale Stevens and Joshua Moore. Wow. Guys, how you doing? Hope you're all well. Hope you've enjoyed your week so far. It's Friday. It's coming up to Christmas, like I said. Let's get those positive vibes over to Santa. We got Matthew Cutter. Matthew Cutter. Is it Matt Cutter or Matthew Cutter? Because I know he was Matt. Matt, good evening, young man. Okay, without further ado, guys, I've been talking to tonight's guest, Jürgen, over at Pro Herper, and when I met him in Ham, I'm not going to lie, I expected to see this very, very older guy with glasses, like a scientist, like a mad scientist type of guy, and presented in front of me was a very young guy, very knowledgeable. And yeah, I was totally taken back because he wasn't what I was expecting. So I thought, you know what, we need to get Jürgen on. We need to have a discussion. I want to talk about genetics. I want to know what Pro Herper are doing for the future. I want to know about shed testing. Is it relevant to us? Is it going to make a big change? Has it made a big change? So I want to shut up. Jürgen is here. Good evening, young man.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Nice to be here, and thanks a lot, Gavin, for the invitation. And yeah, sorry I'm not wearing glasses.
No, dude, you know what? It's crazy because the whole science aspect behind genetic testing is you expect these crazy scientists with labs and, you know, lab coats and doing crazy experiments, you know. And there you was, just a young dude, very smart, very trendy, if you like. And I was just like, wow, this guy's young, you know. So yeah, it was great to meet you, you know. Absolutely awesome.
Nice to meet you too. And yeah, looking forward to see you more and more, and actually more of you guys also in Ham. It's a great show. So yeah, I really like it there. You always meet lots of nice people. Yeah, I think almost everyone
Yeah,
in
100%.
Europe
And you
is
do
there. So
realise
that's really great.
we're going to kidnap you and bring you over into the UK. So you've got to come to some of our UK events. You know that.
I definitely should come over. I think in spring should be a good timing, somewhere in spring.
Yeah.
In fall, it's baby hatching season, and then it's super, super busy, of course, with the testing. So that's maybe a little bit more difficult, but in spring, definitely it should be possible.
Yeah, we can range. I've got a few drivers in mind. I think we can drive over, drag you back over, and get you back over the border in time for the weekend. I'm sure we can work something out.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us how Pro Herper is where it is today. What was the whole concept with the whole shed testing thing?
So, like most of you guys, I've been keeping and breeding ball pythons since I was a very young kid. I'm still young, as you already mentioned. But I was keeping and breeding reptiles since I was 11 years old, so already a very long time. And I've always loved ball pythons in particular. Also, there I've been keeping them for quite some time now. And actually, everything exploded when I saw this really nice publication by Alan. So this is one of the guys in Canada who is offering the genetic testing, where they revealed the piebald mutation. And this is what actually started it all. There were also some other people working on albino at that time, but also on ultramel, for example,
Mm-hmm.
in the US. But I think really piebald there, I really saw a lot of potential because, as you know, many people love piebald. Would
Yeah,
love to know, even though you have the markers, but in clowns sometimes, for example, it can be very difficult to see, or with other
yeah.
mutations, it can be quite difficult to see. So I just got to work. At that time, I just finished my PhD, so I'm a molecular cell biologist. And I just talked to my former boss, asked him if I could go and use his lab facilities, and that's how it started. And from
Wow.
there, it just snowballed into where we are now, developing our own tests, and yeah, hopefully also be able to launch a new website very soon. Hopefully somewhere in January, February. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Wow. Wow. And before we get into the nitty gritty, Jürgen, you told me today that you've got a bit of an announcement, a bit of an exclusive that you were going to discuss. I don't know what it is. I have no idea. But we can get into that towards the middle, towards the end of the interview. Okay, I've got a list here of the tests that you currently offer. So I'm going to run through the list. So I believe you offer obviously Pied,
Yep.
Ultramal, Clown, and Cryptic. We've spoken about Cryptic. We think migraine is potentially the same thing, which it would make sense.
Yep.
So that's going to be interesting. We've got Albino, we've got Yellow Belly, Spectre, Spark, Gravel, Asphalt, Lavender, and Hypo. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So, in terms of everything that you've got there, I mean, that for me is a big array of tests. You know, you've got all the Yellow Belly complexes, which is really interesting, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the recessives kind of nailed down. You know, um, which one of those? And I know I saw someone in the comments ask about the DG stuff, which we'll get in because when me and Jurgen spoke at the Ham, I kind of was a bit shocked with what he said and in agreement, but we'll get into that. Tell us a bit more. What have you? We've now got obviously an indication of what you offer. Tell us without telling us the exclusive one. Keep that towards the end. What were the ones you're developing? What are the ones that you said to me in Ham?
So what I will be developing very soon, what I'm now working on is DG, Desert Ghost. But then I actually was waiting. So usually the bottleneck is getting enough sheds. I should be getting more than enough sheds once I can start, for example, for puzzle, or any other recessive basically. Usually the bottleneck is getting more than enough sheds from different breeders, because you need some genetic diversity, because if everything comes from the same breeder, it becomes a little bit more difficult. It's maybe a little bit technical, and maybe I don't have to go into the details there. But so ideally you want to have at least 20 sheds from visual animals. If you're going after codom, should be supers. And then, yeah,
So
especially
basically,
from
So what you're saying, Jurgen, is that if we're going to work with like OD, for example, Orange Dream, you'd want at least 20 sheds from super ODs. Is that what you're saying? And then obviously you can work backwards with that.
Yeah, preferably. So it also depends on the demand. So for example, let's just say super vanilla. I do have around a dozen or so sheds of super vanilla, and yeah, I think I will already give it a go fairly soon. Somewhere in spring, I will try to go after a shed test for super vanilla, because yeah, there are quite a few people also want to differentiate between vanilla and fire, of course.
Yeah.
So there, getting 20 will probably be quite difficult. So yeah, it also depends on the the morph, let's say. For visual puzzles, for example, it's a little bit easier to get to 20 than for super vanillas or super ODs. Sometimes can be a little bit more tricky. So it also
Yeah.
depends on the morph and how fast I can get the sheds.
Yeah. Of course.
The difference is actually, if I have around 10, for example, I will have much more work in the lab. Once I get the test going, I need to validate it in the lab, and I will have a lot more work when I only have 20. When I only have 10, sorry. When I have 20, it should become a lot more clear, actually. When I go to the lab, there will be less candidates, potential candidates, that I can use for testing,
Okay.
if that
Yeah,
makes sense
that
for
kind
you.
of makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, the more supers or the more visuals, so if it's
Yeah.
recessive, the more visual, the better. The more supers, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So that kind of makes sense, guys. If you have any questions, which I can see Darren's put a question down below, and I know Sam at the Snake Pit UK, you've asked a question. We're going to get into that one very shortly, because that could be a whole can of worms. But we will get into that. So, Darren, you've asked, are you any closer, Jurgen, with the Monarch shed testing?
So for Monarch, I actually recently got a lot of sheds, especially from Herman. I don't know if you know Herman van
Yeah,
Helm. He's also
yeah,
Belgian. He's got a lot of Monarch stuff, and I actually just went there to his facility, and then yeah, he gave me a lot of Monarch sheds. And then there are also some other people that have been contributing. So again, like I said, ideally I should have some from different people, so that you have different genetic backgrounds, let's say.
yeah.
So now I'm very close, actually, or I think I even have enough to start with developing the test. I just need some time now, and I will probably start in January. Once I start and everything goes well, it's around 2 to 3 months before I will have the test. So
Two
ideally,
to
I will
three
have it
months.
somewhere by the
Yeah,
end of March. Yeah.
yeah. So that's interesting to understand the time frame between starting the testing process, as in trying to make a test for it, compared
Mm-hmm.
to when you will actually have that data that you can operate from. So that's interesting to know that you're talking, 2 to 3 months. It gives us an understanding as
Mm-hmm.
someone like myself who's very we think we know the basics, but really we're just talking gibberish. But it's good to hear the time frame, because then we understand how complex this is. That then makes a difference when we're paying money. And I don't mean that in a sense of, oh, this is how much it's going to cost. It's value for money, and that's what we've got to understand. I think that's important. Just where did I see another one? Paul at PMC has asked, any plans for tri-stripe test?
Yeah. So That's also a good question, Paul. So thanks for that. So actually, I really love to develop a tri-stripe test, but the problem there is don't really have enough sheds. I think I have maybe a handful, 3, 4, 5, I don't know by heart. So not that many. So I need a lot more sheds, sorry, from visual animals before I can develop the test. So there, I'm a little bit further away because again, the bottleneck usually is getting enough sheds. And for tri-stripe, I've been asking a few people, but seems to be a little bit harder to find 20 or so visual tri-stripe sheds.
I think what we need to understand as well, guys. So let's say I know Paul's got tri-stripe. Let's say Steve Walker. I know Steve Walker's also got tri-stripe. If those animals, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jurgen, if those animals originated from the same bloodline,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of not what we want, isn't it? We want different bloodlines. Is that correct?
Yeah, ideally, indeed, you want the animals to be as unrelated as possible.
Yeah.
But of course, sometimes, if that's what we have to work with, then that's what we have to work with.
Yeah, because there's
The
quite a
more,
few people on here, Jurgen, who have tri-stripes. So all I'm thinking of is,
Mhm.
between the group of people who work with tri-stripe, I know they would happily send you some visual tri-stripe sheds, but
Yep.
provided, I suppose, that they come from a different bloodline, or we can still send them over to you. It just means that potentially we need to know where they come from. Is what
Mhm.
I would think.
Yeah. So, like I said, I already have a few, a handful. So I think if you guys can send me, I don't know, depends on how many you have, but of course everything will help. Um, but if I can add those to the 5 I already have, I think, I can already give it a go, and hopefully we will be able to develop the test. Um, but again, the more animals we have and the less related they are, the easier it will become for me and the faster I will be able to develop it. That's the thing. So it's
Yeah,
always a little bit of a bottleneck of getting enough sheds from unrelated animals, but also making sure that at a certain moment I just have to, go for it. And if it takes too
yeah,
long to get more sheds, then I just have to go for it and try it already. So yeah.
perfect. Perfect. We've got another question coming from New Gene Balls. 20 dark sun sheds coming up. So, New Gene have got this gene. I don't know if you've spoken to New Gene Balls. They've got this gene called dark sun. I'm not going to get into the dynamics of it because I will probably butcher it. But it's an
Mhm.
interesting gene. I presume it's working like a recessive. And I think these guys know what it's all about. So before I butcher it, I will, guys at New Gene, reach out to Pro Herper and see if it's anything he can help you with, definitely. But that'd be interesting if they could get that over to find out what's going on. Um, Perfect. Absolutely awesome. Thanks, guys. Marv,
Thanks a lot.
he's asked a question. Can you explain the actual process of shed testing? Does it involve a PCR techniques?
Yep. So that's a good question, and indeed, it involves a PCR technique. So I guess most of you or all of you know PCR by now, especially thanks to COVID. We've all heard of the PCR test, most likely. So what PCR actually is, and I don't think many people really understand what it is, but it's basically a way to copy DNA. So in a similar way as we have a copy machine with paper, um, so you can basically use it for any part of the DNA. You can use it to copy the DNA of a virus and then try to detect the virus. The issue
Mm,
there with Corona, for example, or COVID, is that if you don't have enough virus, then the PCR will not work. And then even though you test negative, you can still have COVID and all these things. Luckily for us, of course, we can standardize this because we can get more than enough shed. I can get a nice big piece, and um, this is how I will be able to get more than enough DNA and that the PCR will work. Now, of course, if the shed is stored in a bad way, hasn't been properly stored, was not dry or was wet for too long, let's say, the DNA will degrade and then the PCR can fail. So if I want to explain the complete process, it always starts with getting the shed, of course, then isolating the DNA. Then there is a PCR reaction, so where you copy a specific part of the DNA, where we know that the mutation, for example, for PIDE, is located. And then we send it over to another lab, actually, because then you have to read the DNA. So once you have more than enough copies, you can read it, because otherwise it's very difficult to read it, actually. So this is why we need a lot of copies and why we use the PCR reaction. And then we can send it to another lab. They have very expensive equipment that unfortunately we cannot afford yet. They read it for us, then we get the results back, and then I process the results, and then I send it out to you guys. So that's how it works in a nutshell.
Roughly, and this will probably help. Sam over at Snake Pit has asked, roughly how many hours go into developing each test?
Yeah, that's a bit difficult question to answer, because it really depends. Like I said, sometimes it can be quite fast. Clown was very easy, actually, went very fast. I got the results back from the test, and then what I always do is I check literature. So I check if the mutations that I find back. So what I end up is a list with hundreds or even thousands of mutations. Then I need to check them. And then based on some parameters, I already have a good indication which ones will most likely be responsible for the clown phenotype, so the clown color, let's say. If we check that list, and I check some publications, and I see that, for example, in, let's say, dogs and horses, it's known that this is also a mutation that really affects color of a dog and of a horse and of I don't know what else, then of course this is a very good candidate mutation. Then we go to the lab and then we confirm it. But sometimes, like the test that I've been developing right now, and we will come back to that later, that we are launching now, it's a little bit more difficult if it's a little bit more subtle. So especially like albino, lavender, these are tests that are well known. I mean, we even have humans that have albino mutations, right? So then it's actually fairly easy, but sometimes it can be really difficult, and then we really have to go to the lab and spend a lot of hours testing all these different mutations and checking. And this is also what we've been doing for Desert Ghost, and this is why it's taking so long.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's, that list that I've got in front of me. It's very easy to look at that list and go, "Wow, you've got a lot of stuff there." But then, really, if you look at it, there's not that much compared to what we have in regard to mutations. But then now you've explained the process, you kind of understand why all these mutations haven't been shed out yet, processed yet. So it's that working process that we've got to work with to get the information correct, which we'll quickly jump into in a moment regarding the DG stuff. But yeah, so a couple of people have mentioned, Steve, we have just spoke about the tri-stripe. Jürgen needs a few more tests. And if you rewind, and we'll go back to this at a later date, you'll see I maybe suggested that you and Paul and a few others who are in the tri-stripe send Jürgen some tests. We just need to make sure that they come from a different bloodline to help the tests be
some
more
sheds,
not non-related animals. So that's going to be interesting. And that brings me back into the subject that we've spoken about before, is lineage. Lineage of animals is very important because, for good reasons, is that we can trace back where the animals come from. So that's why sometimes it's important to buy from the correct breeder, because then you can trace it back. You can go, well, I brought this, I don't know, this ultramel off Gav. It looks weird. It looks different. It's doing different things. Gav, where's this ultramel come from? I can then trace it back and then go, oh, actually, the dad to that was actually an ultramel het pied. Oh, okay. So now you stand a chance of having an animal that's het pied. That's where you can then send the test off to Jürgen or to someone else, whether it be RGI or Jürgen or anyone else, and get it tested and get some results. So lineage is really important when we look back where the animals come from, how it's been made, what it's been made with. I know Jake over at my friend Jake from Python Junkie, he's produced some strange looking lavenders. And now he's thinking that maybe they're not lavenders. Well, again, simple thing, lineage, and send that shit back. Or one of them looks different anyway. But which is really, I genuinely believe the lineage of stuff is so important, because then we can obviously know where stuff's coming from, and then we can trace it back. So, Jürgen, I've seen Mac's question. I think it's either a question or a comment. You've invested your own time and money and resources into the tests that aren't disclosed by others, that they are doing it. For example, Clown, you haven't just recreated that test.
Yeah. So that's correct. So there's two ways to obtain tests. So one is just looking at research papers that have been published, like for albino or for Pyth. But then, of course, you still need to, recreate the test in your own lab and validate it and all these things. But sometimes the mutation is not even known yet, and this is the case for Clown. So it's not out there. There is no publication out there. So there, I really had to start from scratch. And it's the same with DG and many of these that have been mentioned already, like Tri-Stripe, Monarch. So there, I'm really starting from scratch, and I'm actually indeed developing my own tests. So that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, as a publication, Clown wasn't available, but albino was. And obviously, you put your time and effort into that to produce your Clown test.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's an interesting point, Mac. Thanks for bringing that up. That's good to know. Jordan, like family tree. Yeah, 100%. The heritage of ball pythons. Look, we've got it in dogs. You know what I mean? If New Gene's balls, one of their snakes won Snake of the Year or Snake of the Show or Best Snake in Show, whatever, then he can use that as a lineage, as, this one Best in Show at either the ARC or the B2 UBC. So it's stuff like that, joking apart, which I think is quite important. So KNC have asked a question. Is it a question or is it really a statement? So basically, what you're doing, Jürgen, is so important and appreciated. You're doing incredible things. Thank you. So that's something I wanted to really touch on before we get into the DG conversation and before we get into the exclusive. How do you think, I know from a breeder's aspect, did you ever think that shed testing would have such an effect on how we move forward?
So first of all, I think that's a really nice comment. So thanks a lot for that. And I also really appreciate how everyone in the community is helping me and trying to provide chats and helping me in that way to develop the test. So thanks a lot for that. Getting back to your question, how it changes the industry, or that's a really difficult question, and I think it will change the industry in ways that we cannot imagine right now. So I can give you a few examples, and what we can do, for example, is develop a test for yellow belly complex. This is something I'm working on. And what we could do is, as you may know, is that a lot of these imports that come out of Africa, they have this yellow belly phenotype, and you could start screening them actually and see whether or not they are yellow belly, if they are asphalt, or if they are spectre or whatever, if they're already something known. If they are something new, then we immediately don't have to spend all this time trying to breed them and all these things. We would immediately know this is something in the yellow belly complex, but it's completely different from what we have.
Yeah.
And this is really going to bringing, I think, a lot of these new, potentially new mutations, and I think, or morphs. It's going to speed up the way we bring into new morphs into the hobby, and I think that's really great. That's just one example, and of course, it will also really speed up the way we now produce double, triple, and quadruple, or whatever
Yeah.
recessives. So also there, it's completely changed the way we breed animals, which I also really like, of course. But something I also always should mention is that, of course, even though the tests are great and they work and whatever, we don't really actually produce new triple huts, let's say. We don't actually produce animals that are now having the hut clown mutation or whatever. If you have a 66% possible hut, we just give you the information, and it's already proven after a few
Yeah.
weeks. Normally, you should wait a few years, and many of these will eventually be proven out by breeders, or that's actually what was happening in the past. So now we just sped
Yeah.
it up a little bit,
I
but it's
suppose
not
if you think
changing
about
the
it,
amount.
yeah, if you
Sorry.
think about it now, instead of breeding a visual, let's say a clown to a pastel, keep it simple, you know
Mhm,
everything in that clutch is going to be het clown. However, if you had only a het clown to breed to
mhm,
that pastel, then you know potentially 50% of that clutch, in theory, should be het clown. Well, now what we can do, we can send the sheds off from the babies and get them tested and find which
mhm.
ones are 100% het clown, which then
Yeah.
means from a breeding aspect, from a breeder's point, I now don't worry if I haven't got a visual male. Now I can look at my het males and go, well, do you know what? I can use a het male and I can send off the sheds from the
Mhm.
animals that I want to keep from that clutch and see if they're actually het clown. And if they
Yep.
are het clown, then great, I can keep them. So it kind of helps from a breeding aspect. I mean, you know, I think I gave you 17 of my own sheds to be tested. And I
Mhm.
think when I gave him you, you looked at me as if to go, this guy's crazy. Because literally, for me as a breeder, when I looked at all my animals and I've gone, well, I mean, most of this stuff was like Posset, ultramale stuff. And I've looked at it
Mhm.
and I've gone, well, I can get that tested, I can get that tested, I can get that tested. That could be a double het. Let's get it tested for that. So for me as a breeder, it certainly changed how I do my breeding plans, if that makes sense, and
Yep.
how I grow those animals up. Because now, if I've got an animal that's Posset Pied or Posset Clown, and I really need it to be Posset Clown, I can get it shed tested rather than growing it up for 2 years
Mhm.
and breeding it and trying to prove it out. So, from my aspect as a breeder, having the shed testing available, it's certainly it was weird, Jurgen, because I was going through my stuff and I was looking and I was like, the minute I got one shed, I was like walking past the tubs and I went, oh, that's Posset Clown. Oh, I'm going to get that tested. Put a clip on it. And then I went past another one and went, oh, that's Posset Hypo. Oh, let's get that tested.
Mhm.
Because I know that animal then will change what I do this breeding season. So it was literally the more my eyes were trained to look for possets in my collection, the more I went, yeah, I need to get that tested. I need to get that tested. That needs to be tested as well. And it was almost before I know it, I had like 17 sheds to give to you. It was crazy. So that's going to be an interesting bill to pay, nonetheless. So let's just have a quick look. So we've got a
Yeah,
few
Gavin,
questions.
maybe if I may, just a quick
Yeah,
comment.
yeah,
Um,
cool.
what I wanted to say also is that it's addictive. I have a lot of people that message me and they say, I really want to know the results. When do I get the results? I mean, this is as exciting as hatching babies. First you
Oh, yeah,
hatch the babies, and then in the second step, you know their true genetics. You know which ones are the 100% huts and which ones aren't. So it's almost as exciting as hatching babies. So that's really nice. But also indeed it speeds up and it changes the way you breed. So just to give you an example, what I did this year was I used the clown hut pied male and I paired it to a desert ghost, for example, and now I already have some triple huts. So normally if I wanted to do this, then yeah, I really needed to invest a lot of money, but now you can do this in a lot cheaper actually, even though you still
yeah,
pay for the test. But if you yeah if you check out everything, all your costs and all these things, then I mean you can compete with the big breeders even by using these
Yeah.
tests. That's great.
And what I've noticed as well is some of those animals that I gave you the sheds for, I've looked at them and gone, if that proves out to be double het, I'm going to keep that animal. Instead of selling it now, I'm looking at it going, I'm going to keep it, you know, because it completely, like I said, it completely changes things. Like you said, you made triple hets because you was able to test. And that's something that, like you said, instead of buying, you know, those expensive animals, we can kind of do it a little bit on the cheaper side, where we can afford to make some amazing animals thanks to genetic testing. One
Yeah.
One of the questions I wanted to ask to you was, how reliable or how accurate are the tests?
That's of course a very important question. And so the tests right now, they have been designed in a way that if I prove it out as a 100% hut, then you can be very confident that it's indeed a hut. Now, the other way around, it's a bit more difficult, and it depends on the test, and it depends on the morph. So, for example, for Ultramel, we know that there is a line that we are not picking up. So, if it's negative for hut Ultramel, so the animal comes back as negative, it can still be the other line. So in spring,
Yeah,
I will start working on the other line again. But also for albino, we know that there is also another line. The good thing with Ultramel is that the other line is very rare, or seems to be very rare in Europe. So I pick up a lot of huts. But for albino, this isn't really the case. So the one that I pick up, and I think it's the high contrast albino line that I'm
yeah,
not picking up. And so if you have high contrast animals, then usually I will not pick on. Yeah, then I will not pick them up. Um, but also there we will work on improving the tests, and the proof is in the pudding, let's
yeah,
say. So the more we test, the more we will realize, okay, we're missing something here, and we will improve the tests. So yeah.
yeah. I think that's important to understand as well, because, like, we know most of the line of Ultramel. Obviously, I work heavily with Ultramel, and the line that I use is the Noah line. I have used the Kreidler line regarding the compatibility. It is compatible. Both lines are compatible with each other, but that's probably why you get a different looking animal. So you might like the high contrast albino. Like,
Mhm.
yes, it's albino, but it's reacting in a different way. And it's the same with the Ultramel. The Noah line for me is very, prominent. It's there. It's in your face. The Kreidler line is almost like caramel looking. So it's really interesting to hear that. I didn't think there'd be two lines of Ultramel. I thought if
Mhm.
they are compatible, you'd be able to see them. But I suppose if you think about it, we can kind of have, yellow belly compatible with asphalt, and it creates something visual. Doesn't mean that it's
Mhm.
going to be the same thing, if that makes sense. So, we know that gravel, Spectre, Spark, and asphalt are different from each other. Am I correct, Jürgen?
Yeah, so that's correct.
Okay.
So what happens is, this is maybe a little bit technical and biochemical, but what happens at the cellular level, let's say, is that you have different mutations, and the different mutations can have the same effect on a protein. So a gene actually is always translated into a protein, and this protein has a certain function in your body. And usually a mutation, has a bad effect on the protein. Not always, but usually this is the case. And so you can have different mutations. And these different mutations can either have a different effect at the protein level, or they can have the same effect. And this is why sometimes, even though they look visually more or less similar, so these two Ultramels, they look similar, probably, I don't know, they could still be, visually could be different.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can be more visually different. Let's say cryptic versus clown, or spectre versus yellow belly, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's really true. And I think, to get back to your earlier question, how is this going to change the industry? Like you say, I think for Ultramel, for example, it can be that there are lines like the ones you're mentioning that's just visually more stunning, and people are now, they don't really know which line they have. And I think once the tests keep going and we also know, okay, this line is much nicer,
Yeah.
then this probably also is going to go up in value again.
Yeah.
And also for some, yeah, some morphs like candy, which have been mixed with albino for quite a long
Hmm.
time, it was always
Hmm.
very difficult to find out whether or not you had a candino or not,
Yeah.
candy or a candino,
Yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
always took you a very long time. So I think more people will start working with candy again as well,
Yeah.
maybe mixing it with albino as well. So this is, I think, going to change the industry in
Oh
so
yeah.
many ways that we don't even think about yet, right?
Yeah. 100%. And like I said, for me, going through my collection and like not being funny, but there was some today I was looking at and I thought I could have got that tested,
Mm.
and I didn't even think about getting it tested. And I'm there thinking I should have got that tested. So no doubt I'll be sending some more over to you. But Mel over at MJ, she works with Candy, and it's like you said, when you've got a Candino, you kind of have to wait till it gets a little bit older. There is some difference as a baby, but it's if you've never
Mhm.
seen a Candino before, you just think it's a candy.
Mhm. Can be
So
subtle.
yeah, 100%. So it's going to be interesting, definitely. Mel is working with pure candy, so if you do need any candy sheds, I can send them over to you as well. So that's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, we do have a candy test. Maybe this is one we missed at the start. I don't know if I
Maybe,
mentioned it.
maybe I've missed that one. But I've got the list here. Maybe I missed it,
Yeah,
Jurgen. It could have been me. Could have been me. Okay,
yeah.
that's brilliant. Swap from shed testing, hatchling shed test all older animals. Right. So it's not a daft question, Darren. There's no such thing as a daft question. Um, is it easier to get? Is it easier to test and get an accurate result from shed testing a hatchling as opposed to an adult? Which would you
So
prefer?
to be honest, there is no difference in accuracy. What the only difference that there is, I think, is that if you have a baby and you just look at the shed, you will see that there are way more cells. So it's a lot smaller. The scales are a lot smaller.
Yeah,
And so because you have a baby, you have a lot more scales at a certain area. So let's take a piece of shed like the size of a coin. If you take an adult and you start counting the scales, and you take a baby and you start counting the scales, you will have a lot more scales, of course, from a baby. So
yeah,
we will get more DNA and probably, yeah, maybe not necessarily better quality, but generally we'll get more DNA from a baby shed, unless we take, of course, a lot more from an
that's
adult.
interesting.
So that's the only difference. What that means is that, yeah, you're just less likely, I would say, that the test fails. But
Yeah.
in terms of accuracy, there is no difference. No.
Oh, that's interesting. No, like I said, it's not a daft question, mate. It's
Yeah.
uh,
Good
it's
question.
good to know, definitely. Okay, right. Yes, Mac, me and you was talking about the DG stuff in the week, and we might as well get into the DG, the elephant in the room. Jurgen, let's talk DG.
Yeah.
What did you what have now? Obviously, this isn't factual. This is something that you've noticed. Is that correct? Tell us what you've noticed.
So what I've noticed, so there are three people working on DG right now. So we have, of course, the Americans, we have the Canadians, and then I'm also working on it. And so we all, I guess, almost all of you know the story about RGI and their DG testing, where they claimed that it was polymorphic. So which means that it's actually multiple genes that are responsible for the phenotype, so the way DG looks. Now, I have to say that I've been skeptical from the start, in a sense that what they claimed was that if you breed two visuals together, there could be situations where you don't breed or where you don't hatch visuals. Now, personally, I've never seen that. I also talked to many other breeders. None of them were able to say, okay, I had this happen in my facility where I bred two visuals together and didn't produce visuals. So I've always been a little bit skeptical about this. And the reason, and I'm not sure if you were the one who told me, Gavin, or maybe someone else, the reason why they think it's probably polymorphic, and this is what I heard, it's not confirmed from them, but I think that they received all their sheds from Kinova. That's what
Yeah,
I think.
I mentioned that to you. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what you mentioned to me, right? And so this is why I told you at the start that it's very important to have different lineages. And so we need sheds from unrelated animals, because if you have very related animals, then it's possible that other things pop up just because of some inbreeding, basically, because they are so
yeah,
closely related. You'll start to see maybe things, or start to pursue things that aren't there, let's say. I think RGI, I mean, they're doing great work, developing a lot of tests, and they're also great for the industry. I've had gotten a lot of business thanks to them. So, I mean, great guys for sure. But I think in this case, maybe they communicated a little bit too early. So what I see now, and what the Canadians see, and also now with the new data from RGI, is that it's just a simple recessive. That's what I believe now, and I think I've, yeah, I have to say I haven't watched their latest videos yet from RGI. I'm not sure what they're communicating right now. So, but yeah,
yeah.
that's what I see. That's what the Canadians see. So the Canadians, they have a test now, and for them it's also just a simple recessive. I'm close to a test, and for me it looks also, it's like 95% confident. So it's not, I'm not there yet. But what I see is that it's also just a simple recessive.
Okay, that's obviously we spoke about this, and that's kind of, you kind of now at the stage where we're going, well, where do we stand? You know, what do we do? What you know, because the way the information was released, and I'm going to say this because this is how I feel. The way
Mm-hmm.
the information was released, I felt was very, it wasn't very constructive. I felt that it was too early, like you said, and that testing just one test subject is kind of, you kind of asking for trouble. And there's a lot of variance. I see a lot of variance in DG. Like you can go on Morph Market now, and I've spoken about this before on the lives. You can go on Morph Market now and look at DG. There is so many variants of visual DGs that
Mm-hmm.
it kind of just blows your mind. You're like, well, hang on a minute. I know we're going to get variances in pied, like high white, low white, but DG, you know, you kind of expect it to be this amazing like cleaning gene, amplified color, or you know, very cleaning gene, and you see some of them are very almost look, yeah, they look terrible if you like. So then it gets you thinking, well, you know, when RGI came out with this information, it was kind of like, well, that kind of makes sense because I've hatched different animals, different looking animals. You know, and there were, you guys know I was calling it DG and Super DG, you know, because I was kind of like, well, what is it? That's a DG and that's a Super DG. Yeah. Like the quality you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of see. This one's got
Yeah.
different pattern, different color, and vice versa. I sent them, I sent them the original male because I've used one line of DG predominantly within my collection. I sent them a shed from him
Mm-hmm.
and a shed from his granddaughter, which was a visual DG. And typical, I was waiting, and it seems like this run of testing, because I sent it over part of the free shed testing.
Mm-hmm.
This run of sheds is just all over the place. Like mine, you can go on their data sheet and look at 210 and 211, which are mine, and it
Mm-hmm.
says it's all in red, rerun. Like either no DNA or it was either no DNA or the DNA was bad, something like that. Now, those sheds, as far as I was concerned, were perfect. I don't see how they were damaged or could be damaged. We'll get into how a shed can be damaged. I know you mentioned it about being in the water, all that sort of stuff. I'm just waiting to hear back if they can retest the sheds that I sent over. But there was something that I thought of, that we could have different lineages of DG. There could be some sort of polymorphic trait, but there could also be a recessive trait. Now, this may answer people's questions when they're breeding stuff, because I've hatched. So when I made double het DG Xantics, I was making more DGs than Xantic, like within the clutch. Yeah. So when I was breeding them together, I was getting more DGs than I was Xantics. And at first I thought it was just a fluke. And then when RGI came out with this theory, or this information, it kind of explained a lot of things. I thought, well, yeah, I am getting more DGs. And they said, you will probably get more DGs in a clutch because we're working with a polygenic trait. And it kind of made sense. Now, but then you also was fighting and thinking, well, hang on a minute, but it kind of works like a recessive. So it was really confusing on me personally. I think it's damaged the DG project. I think a lot of people were unsure and just went, you know what, I'm not getting involved, and just started to sell off their DG stuff. So I think how we relay this information is important. And I think how we release new information needs to be learned by that. And I think we need to learn as we go. But what was your... Do you think it could be that the line that we have in Europe is a recessive, or have you tested anything from America, or do you think they've got a different line, or what's your theory?
So, first of all, I think there are a few lines, right? We have DG, which I guess it's all the Bell line DGs. We have Enhancer. We have Blondie from Hans Winner, which is also a fairly recent line. We have the Sahara stuff. I'm not sure if that's compatible. I think you can probably fill in that information.
Yeah, I think I've just picked up a couple of Sahara animals, which I'm happy to send you over the sheds, simply because I wanted to still work with a DG type animal, but I wanted to see, and again, we've got the Enhancer line, which Canada have, and the Sahara line, which seem to be more consistent. So, yeah, I'm happy to send you some Sahara sheds over as and when.
Yeah. So what I know from the Canadians is that they've been testing now DGs and enhancers, and the test seems to work for both of them. So I guess that enhancer and DG is basically the same. As for the Sahara and the Blondie, I'm not sure. I have never tested those, and I'm not aware of anyone working on those as well. So in terms of genetic testing.
Okay, so where do you think so your theory is basically they just got it wrong because they were just testing one person's collection, or one sample size, let's say.
So I think someone in the comments, I'm not really actively looking at all the comments, sorry for that, but I think someone mentioned that with DGC, they're very close to an actual recessive test, let's say. And I think this is actually indeed the case. So I think they were able to nail it down with DGC now. And then DGA and DGB, it's basically this is a bit difficult to explain, but like I said, you will end up with a large list of all these different mutations, and then you need to check. And the closer you are to the actual mutation, the more predicted it will be. So I think DGA is pretty far away, so it's not that predictive. Then DGB is a little bit closer already, and then DGC is either the correct mutation or it's very, very close to the correct mutation. And so the closer you are to the actual mutation, the more predictive it will be, most likely.
Okay. Yeah,
And so they've been. Sorry?
I was just trying to look for that comment that you mentioned.
Yeah, I'm not sure who mentioned it. Maybe it was Mac. Yeah, there was someone mentioning DGC.
Let's have a quick look. Sam.
Yeah, it was another one. Maybe before that, I was also looking.
I'll look. Yeah, I'll look through them.
Yeah, and I think someone also mentioned. Of course, we have a lot of different.
It was
so
Sam.
This is Sam indeed. So I think Sam is right. So that's what I'm trying to explain here. That's the first thing, and then the second thing is that someone else also mentioned it, I think, but especially here in Europe, we have a lot of these, let's say, hidden genes within Desert Ghost. So we know that, for example, cryptic comes from Desert Ghost. So a lot of these cryptic animals, especially here in Europe, seem to prove out to be HUD cryptic. So it's of course possible that if you're trying to look for a DG test and they all come from one collection and all of them or a lot of them are HUD cryptic, sorry, you also start to pick up cryptic maybe, and maybe they've been pursuing. I'm not going to say that they've been pursuing cryptic, but maybe this is why they saw or they believed that it was actually two genes. So we have cryptic, which comes from Desert Ghost, but there are also other ones like caramel, for example. I think a lot of animals, especially from Joris van der Hilst's collection, I think, and some people in the Netherlands have a lot of caramel stuff mixed with their DG stuff. So I mean, there are all these other genes that have been mixed in DG, and maybe they've been pursuing something like that. Who knows? And thinking that, okay, this is something that we saw, but okay, it doesn't, of course, correlate with the DG phenotype, let's say. So even though it looks like this is a HUD for something, and it's also HUD Desert Ghost, doesn't mean that it's HUD for this mutation, that it actually corresponds to the Desert Ghost phenotype, let's say, if that makes sense. And again, the more inbred you are, there are hundreds of other mutations that are just not visual. So cryptic, of course, as a homozygous is visual. And also, of course, caramel, it's the same, but there are hundreds of these mutations that, we just visually don't see a difference. You could have a homozygous for another mutation somewhere in the genome.
Yeah. No, that's definitely interesting, because Mac also said about could DGA, DGB, and DGC be different lines of DG? Because I think in the beginning, when RGI was trying to explain about the DG stuff, they were talking very heavily about A and B. And they kind of said, well, there's something we've seen, but we can't really pinpoint that. And thinking about it, when we found out that they were only working with one person's collection, then that kind of makes sense. So if that person's only got one lineage, let's say, hypothetically, let's not cloud the water anymore. If that person dealing with one lineage, a bit like the ultramale stuff, where we've got two lineages, you will only see one type of reaction. If we were getting a sample from multiple people, then potentially we can then look at it and go, well, hang on a minute, there is something, but I'm not sure what's going on, rather than just saying that, because everything they were testing and the videos they were putting out were saying, oh, this is homozygous for A and homozygous for B. And then this animal looks visual, but it's heterozygous for A and heterozygous for B. And we were like, what? So it was really confusing,
So that's what I mentioned by, that's why I think that they communicated too early. It's been so confusing, even for me. So this A and B and the entire story that they came up with, it just didn't really match with the DG phenotype. So And now, of course, they have this DGC, which actually does seem to match quite well with the DG phenotype. And so DGC is probably very similar to what people in Canada are using,
Hmm.
and probably also what I'm pursuing. Um,
Yeah.
so for now, there is no evidence of there being multiple lines. So again, we have Blondie, we have Sahara, and these haven't been tested as far as I know. So we don't
Hmm.
know if there are multiple lines. If there are multiple lines, then it's probably quite rare. But maybe getting back to your variation in, and it's true, you have a lot of variation. You have very nice DGs, you have, yeah, maybe not so nice DGs. But this is true for almost every other gene as well, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So you have very nice and clean clowns that don't brown out as much, and then you have clowns that, I mean, they're really not that nice. It's the same with
Yeah.
parts where you have low whites and high whites and everything in between. So you always have a lot of variation, even within a certain morph, let's say. So
Mm. Yeah.
this is also true for Desert Ghost, of course.
Yeah. Mark Bell um, was at the Ham show. I didn't get a chance to speak to him. Did you see him at the show?
No, no.
No.
I have
So
I have to admit I don't know him personally, so I also don't
yeah.
even know what he looks like.
So I wanted to speak to Mark because obviously we knew the DG stuff came from Mark, and a lot of genes from the Bells, and a lot of genes have come from DG: lace, splatter, migraine, cryptic,
Mhm,
so on and so forth. Um, what I wanted to find out from Mark was where did his original animal come from?
mhm,
Because it'd be interesting to know whether or not his first original DG came from um, a normal to a normal, let's say, and something popped out, or whether he actually imported it from Noah. Because going talking about the
mhm.
Sahara is Noah's line of DG. Thanks, Kieran. You said it was compatible. Yeah, I've kind of heard it was compatible,
Yeah,
um, but
thanks a lot for
it's
the
like
information.
yeah, it's like I was trying to say when we breed a yellow belly to a gravel, you're going to get a reaction.
Mhm,
If you breed a yellow belly to a asphalt, you're going to get a reaction. Now, the gravel or the freeway and the highway can look very similar. However, the freeway, I believe, is a lot darker when you look at it, and the highway is a lot lighter. You're still getting a similar reaction, which is why I'm sort of thinking like working with the Sahara stuff. Um, it's come from a different lineage, if you like, than DG. Yes, it may be
mhm,
compatible, but
mhm,
Jurgen could test it and go, actually, yes, Sahara is a full recessive. Now, like
mhm,
you said, you've tested DG stuff and that's come back as a full recessive. But how do we know that the DG lineage in Europe is actually Sahara? You know what I mean? And it's being sold as a DG.
mhm.
This is, again, coming back to the whole lineage thing. Trying to,
Yeah.
if an animal is called a coral glow, keep it a coral glow. Don't call it a banana. Keep it a
Mhm,
coral glow because then we can chase the lineage. So I certainly won't be calling the Saharas DG, and I won't be crossing them into my DG stuff, whether they're compatible or not. I say that
mhm,
now, but I'm confident I won't because I want to keep the bloodline pure. If anything pops out later on down the line, we can trace that back. And again, with genetic testing, we could probably go, hang on a minute, this is what's popped out of this Jurgen. Did you see anything
mhm.
like that? And then obviously we can look back through results and try and find stuff out. So it's really interesting. The DG stuff is definitely.
Yeah. So I think that's a great remark, to be honest, because if you keep the lines, let's say, pure, then I mean it's a lot easier for me, because right now, just to mention the Wookiees and the chocolates, there are several lines of chocolate. Also, you have the Garcia line of chocolate, which I'm not sure. I have chocolate, I have Wookiee. Some chocolates look very similar to Wookiees, I think, especially the Garcia line. But then there are other chocolates, and they really look different.
Different.
Doesn't
Yeah.
mean if it's going to be different actually genetically. Maybe, yeah, that's just my gut feeling, and maybe I'm wrong. So these are all the things that we have to figure out, of course. But if people give them different names and we keep the lines pure, this is a lot easier to develop these tests also.
Yeah.
Because let's say Sahara is actually indeed, it's also the same gene, but it's a different mutation, like we see with Ultramel. It's going to be very difficult to pick it up actually, if we try to develop the test. So if these lines would have been kept clean, in the sense that you just keep the name and yeah, you don't, like what's happening with Wookiees and chocolates, it could be happening as well, where people just say, oh, it looks like a chocolate, so I'm going to call this chocolate and I'm going to sell it as a Wookie or something. If it's genetically different and I start trying to develop a test for these Wookiees, let's say, then of course it's going to be very difficult because I actually have two genes in there, right? So it's still
that's really
possible that
interesting.
this happened, with Desert Ghost, like you mentioned, where we have two different lines, and maybe this is what they picked up at RGI. But right now, I don't think there's really evidence to support that.
No.
But of course, it's still possible.
Yeah, it's just trying to get your head around how they came up with A, B, and C.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I've not had a Het Pied result come back to say, oh yeah, it's Het A and Het B. You're like, what? So what's that mean? You know, it's always been positive or negative for Het Pied, or you know what I mean. So the A, B, and C thing is very, I think, very confusing. And hopefully, between you and Canada, we can have a more understanding test where I can send you a POS Het DG and you can come back and go, yeah, Gav, that's Het DG. Great, thank you. You know, rather than it being, well, it's Het A, it's homozygous for B, and it's negative for C. So what does that mean? You know, can I breed it or can't I? You know, so that's going to be good moving forward. So MJ, I think Marv, we've answered your question, mate.
Yep.
Sam personally thinks that it's a recessive. A and B are just floating about, but I doubt they can produce a visual DGC. He's basically DG, in my opinion. Okay, yeah, it's great. Why? So Liam's asked a good question. Why is a visual not throwing A, B, C to the offspring?
So again, I think what we can basically do is ignore A and B. That's what I believe. So C is what matches with the DG phenotype, so with the DG morph. I haven't seen all the data. I got I think Max sent me the link to the, so thanks a lot for that, to the RGI Excel sheet, but I haven't really had the time to look into it in detail. But I think I saw one of their videos when the first C results came out, because of course I was also curious to see what it looked like. And then it's I mean, when they were showing the data, it really seemed to be matching the phenotype for most of those actually. I think there was one or two that didn't match, but then they were going to check with the breeder, and maybe that one is really a different line or whatever. So it's still possible, but they still need to confirm it, I guess. So if you have a homozygous C, then it's probably a visual Desert Ghost. If it's a HUD C, then it's a HUD Desert Ghost. And you can basically just ignore A and B because it's completely unrelated to the DG color morph. That's what I believe at this stage.
Yeah, a couple of people are just discussing in the comments. You know, Mac and Marv are talking. Sam's just talking a few bits and pieces. They improved the quality of the visual, but I'm thinking that DGCs is the DG recessive gene, which is what you've just basically said. So that sort of talks about that. K and C Royals are saying their brain is hurting. So much information. This is why we record. You guys can go back. This. Believe it or not, we will probably rewatch this video time and time again, because there's bits of this video that we're going to not understand, and then when we start to get our tests come back, we'll start to watch this video, and then it kind of makes sense. So I appreciate you obviously explaining all this. I know it's very difficult to understand, and you said from your aspect, it's a bit difficult to understand from you. So you can imagine my primitive brain is definitely hurting, you know. So yeah, I totally get that. Just looking at through the comments. Is there ever going to be a general screen test? Let me pull this up. So Alice has asked, is there ever going to be a general screen test where a Dinka shed can be tested across the board to find out if it fits any of the current genes or heads? That's a good question. So almost like an all-in-one test.
Yeah. So I think there is a difference between like a morph panel, what RGI is already offering, something I'm not really offering right now. But then you actually just look at the mutation of Pyth, for example, and you look at the mutation of yellow belly, of clown, whatever. And then you just see, do you have one copy of clown? Okay, then it's a HUD clown. Do you have two copies of Pyth? Okay, it's visual Pyth, and so on. What Alice, I think, here is mentioning or questioning is that where we can really look for new mutations actually that are unrelated to Pyth, for example, or to whatever. So let's say you have a monsoon animal, you're the first one, you hatch a monsoon animal, and you're like, okay, let's make sure that we can find a test for this. And what I would say here is that yes, this is possible, but then you still should have quite a clear indication on if it's allelic with something, yes or no. Otherwise, you really have to start from scratch. So this is what I was referring to earlier. If you have like a yellow belly phenotype, then I think it would make a lot of sense to look at the yellow belly gene and see, is there another mutation here? And then it's quite likely that this mutation will be responsible for this color. But if you don't know, like let's say with a monsoon, for example, you don't know where it really fits in all these other genes, or it's really something new, then it's going to be very difficult. And even then, a general screen test will not really work. So it depends on the morph, let's say, that you have. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I brought in a animal that was imported, and originally when I got it, I brought it because I thought it was a yellow belly, and I was after yellow belly. And when I bred it, this is going way back in the day. When I bred it, I actually produced calico-looking animals. So when I went back and looked at the original male, your dog's with you, my dog's with me as well.
It's a cat.
Oh, was it a cat? Well, my dog's making enough noise for
Yeah.
both of them.
Yeah, my dog is next to me, but this is a cat.
Oh, so yeah, but it looks like a calico, and I can't call it a calico because I didn't buy it as a calico, so I had to call it the white line, the white cider. Sorry, and with the white cider, is I've kept it that name because I don't know if it's a calico. Sometimes it produces animals which look crazy. There could be another gene in there which is producing different looking animals, but again, trying to track that lineage. So it'd be interesting eventually once we get a calico test or a sugar test, we can send these sheds off and get them tested. Because at the moment, it's still a dinka that I've proved out. But again, I don't know if there's a super. I just don't know. So it'd be interesting to see, like Alice said, if I picked up that original animal from the wild now, and I thought it was a yellow belly, I could send it to you and go, Jürgen, can you do a panel test, let's say, and tell me what it is? And you could come back and go, Gav, it's a yellow belly. Okay, great, perfect. At least I know what I can work with, you know, and what I can do with it, and all that sort of stuff. So I think the future of genetic testing is only going to be endless possibilities in my eyes, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, so maybe a quick comment on that is that, or maybe, yeah, we already discussed this earlier, where indeed it's good to keep different names. But now at a certain moment, indeed, you can get the shed. And let's say if I have a calico test and I check your animal and it matches with the calico and sugar as well, whatever. Maybe all three are exactly the same, but we just have given different names to this. And this is actually what we already see with cryptic and Amur, for example, and also Gizmo. So Gizmo is something I've been working with for quite some time now, which I always believed actually to be different from Cryptic, because I hatched a few animals that look way different, but still genetically it's the same as Cryptic. And then it's probably the genetic background which is different. But even even the different different looking animals, we as breeders, we're always biased, and we always think that we have something different, right? At least that's in my that was my case. But what I'm trying to mention, or the point I'm trying to make here is actually, once we know that they are the same, should we then, and this is maybe a question to all of you here, should we then give it just one name and maybe even let the community decide and say, okay, instead of having Amur, instead of having Cryptic, and we have Gizmo, and then maybe later also Migraine, if all of them are the same, it's very complicated for new people coming into the hobby and they have all these different names. If we just have, instead of 4 different genes and 4 different names, which is actually exactly the same, wouldn't it be better then to say we call them all Cryptic, and you can still say, okay, this is Cryptic Gizmo line and Cryptic Migraine line. If Migraine is the same, we still have to find out, of course. So what do you think about this? I think that's a very good question moving forward.
I think we've used butter and lesser for so long. I mean,
yeah,
I've seen different combos. I always thought butter and lesser would prove out to be on the same allele, but different, if you know what I mean, genetically different, that they would work the same, but they would be different. I just see, like, if you produce a pastel butter and you produce a pastel lesser, they kind of look different. So, but according to RGI, they're saying that they are exactly the same thing. So, have they tested enough butters? So, for example, someone could have sold a lesser as a butter in someone's collection. They've then gone, oh, you know, maybe they forgot the name and they've gone, oh, I think it was a butter, but really it was a lesser. Yeah. And then they've shed tested, and then they've gone, oh, actually, all butters and lessers are all the same. Well, how do we know that where you know, the test subjects? Who have you used? Have you used everyone's, or have you just used 100 from one person's collection? You know, I don't know. It's going to be interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So my cat is being annoying a little bit.
That's okay. That's fine.
No, I fully agree, and I think, it's going to be another how do you say it? This is another way that that genetic testing will probably change the hobby. So at a certain moment when we have Amur, we have Cryptic, and all these related genes, and we prove that they're all exactly 100% the same genetically, then maybe we can indeed give them the same name. But then there's also the other way around, when we have Yellow Belly and we have 2 different lines of Yellow Belly, and the same with Ultramel, what we were discussing before. Maybe there are some subtle differences, and maybe they look slightly different, and genetically they're also different, which is also interesting to know if you want to test. So maybe we should give those different names instead of saying Ultramel A and B. Maybe we can give, I don't know, Ultramel and whatever. You know?
I personally feel that keeping them different. So, like we said, so if Whitesider is a calico, that's fine. It's fine, because now I know it's a calico mutation, but it's a Whitesider lineage. Because then if later on something else starts to pop out, like I've hatched some this season, and they do look different than before, and you know, they seem to be producing different things. So I think it's important that we still understand that lineage. I think is important, but we can always use, like, oh, this is Coral Glow. Okay, great. So that's that lineage. And this is Banana, but they're the same thing. That's great. But I've got this and I've got that. The other thing, the information that I've had from the States was that, talking about acid, I saw someone mention acid and confusion. Acid, confusion, and static apparently came from the same clutch. The 2 better looking animals stayed in the US, and then the the one that wasn't crazy looking, let's say, went to Europe. Now, how true that is, I don't know. But again, what I've noticed is with acid combos, they do look more crazy pattern, more different than confusion. Confusion kind of is a bit more banded looking and not so crazy. So,
Mm-hmm.
if, for example, those two genes were tested and they came back and they were the same thing, me personally, I would go, this is the acid line,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the confusion line. You know,
Yep.
that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's another good point you're making there, and I think if we look at how most of these morphs came here, it's yeah, most of them came from Africa, of course. Some popped up here, like cryptic. They came from same with leopard, which came from Pied, but most of them just came from Africa. And these people in Africa, what they're doing is they're collecting eggs and then they hatch these eggs in their facilities. And of course, these people are not stupid. They see 2 or 3 animals, they look spectacular, so they know it's genetic, but they're not going to offer all of them to the same people, right? So they try to sell one to Europe and they try to sell the other one to someone in the US. And of course, this is how they get the most money. And I think this happens also quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And as you see it with Coral Glow and Banana, I mean, it's very yeah large coincidence that they always seem to pop up at the same um,
Time.
time scale, more or less, right? So this is probably one of those cases where there was this guy in Africa who hatched a lot of eggs, and in one clutch there was one banana, and then he sold the other one, the banana to I don't know who got the banana, but then Coral Glow went
Real
to Nerd,
slow.
I think. Yeah.
Real slow got the
So
banana and Coral Glow and Freedom. But there was someone else before Freedom Breeder. Someone else
yeah,
got
I
the
don't
Coral
remember.
Glow. Yeah, and then Freedom Breeder and Kevin brought the Coral Glow off him, and then just called it the Coral Glow.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. But maybe something about lineage, because we've been discussing lineage also for some time now. And what I want to say about lineage is, and then I'm touching upon the high intensity OD maybe. Um, this is also the case where many people they start with high intensity OD. So this is of course the nice lineage from Aussie, and then they start breeding it, and after a few generations, it starts looking like a regular OD again, right? Because people are selling it. I've seen this many times when people sell this as a high OD or a high intensity OD, but it looks more or less the same as a regular
Mm.
OD.
Yeah.
And so that's because the mutation for OD and high intensity OD is probably going to be exactly the same, but the
Mm-hmm.
difference there is again the lineage, like you mentioned, and it's because you have other genes that are very subtle. You can also have, I don't know, something like, let's say, a type of enchi or whatever, or something
Mm-hmm.
else that's hiding, and you have multiple of these and you stack them onto each other and you get something that looks very nice. But once you start breeding it to something that's completely unrelated, so Aussie is probably mixing these high intensity ODs constantly,
Mm-hmm.
breeding them back to the same lineage, and this is how he's been building this how do you say it, genetic
Yep.
background.
Yep.
um, but that's the difficult part, because once you start, um, do we lost Gavin?
No,
Okay,
I'm here. Just keep
I think we
talking.
lost Gavin
No,
for a
no, no. I'm
second.
here.
Okay, yeah,
I'm here. Just keep talking, Jurgen.
yeah,
It's still going on. I'm just going to swap over the camera. One moment. Just keep talking.
okay. So what I'm trying to say is that if you go for nice lineage animals, I think you should get multiple animals from that lineage, because otherwise you're just going to start outbreeding and you're losing that genetic background that makes sure that they are very, very pretty. And actually, if you go for high intensity OD animals, for example, you could very well just take a regular OD and you take an offspring that's not OD from a high intensity clutch, because then you also have the genetic background, you pair it to an OD, and then you could also, in theory, produce your high intensity
Yeah.
ODs, if you
I'm,
understand what
not-
I'm trying
I'm
to say.
yeah. I work with both lines, and I noticed that uh, all my original lineage animal produces high OD. There's not like a high OD and a normal OD in the clutch. I've always produced high ODs in the clutch. And they also look different regarding their pattern. But, you know, again, this is all going to be tests, you know, like the bang had been tested. A lot of people thought that the bang was OD. It's been tested over 8, I think it was about 13, 14 sheds have been sent off to be tested for OD. And they all came back negative. So we now know that bang is not OD. The only thing I'm interested in bang stuff is what could it be? So what could it be allelic with? Could it be allelic with enchi? Could it be allelic with cinnamon? I don't know. So that's a sort of genetic route that is being explored at the moment. There is another lab in America that is developing the test privately for the bang to make sure that it's done on a non-biased, let's say, reasons behind it. But I'm just looking at some of the comments as well coming in, and this is really such a hot topic, Jürgen. I think we're going to have to do a part 2 one day, because so many people are talking at different lineage, different lines, what their opinion is, and this is great. This for me, you know, Hurricane and Trick. You know, I've had both in my collection, and I can see a difference between Hurricane and Trick. Genetically, they might come back exactly the same, but I can see a difference. That's why I'm working predominantly with Hurricane and not Trick, because I like the Hurricane a bit better than Trick. But it's going to be interesting to see, that's for sure, where everything goes moving forward. Jürgen, we're not going to keep you much longer. We've been talking like an hour and a half now. Tell us about the news. Tell us about the exclusive. What you want to disclose.
Yeah. So this is the great news that I'm having now. So I have a new test, and you actually just mentioned it. So I think that's coincidental, but still, it's great. So it's a hurricane test, actually.
Wow.
So we'll be the first one to be able to offer it. As far as I know, RGI is not offering it yet. So that's great. I think there are a lot of people that, I've seen a lot of animals that are labeled as possible hurricanes. So I think that will be great moving forward. And then we can also solve the riddle. I haven't done this yet. I still need to check whether or not Trick and Hurricane genetically are identical, and the same with Blitz, of course. The only issue is I do have a dozen or so Trick animals, so Trick sheds. I don't have any Blitz animals or sheds. So this is not something I will be able to figure out in a short term. But I have to say, I also really like the Hurricane. I don't have any Trick animals myself. So this is it. Great
This
news.
is
So you guys are the first one to hear about it.
100%, guys. So you've heard it first. The Hurricane test is predominantly almost finished at Pro Herper, which will be really, really interesting. And look, either way, whichever way, I believe stuff works out. And like Ashley's just said, I think the lineage of stuff, which is stuff that we haven't thought about, is going to be important moving forward. I'd rather have an animal that's been line bred for quality than just go and buy the cheapest version. And we saw this when I was over in Ham. I don't know if you noticed, and this is something I want to touch on maybe on the next one moving forward, is that we consider stuff like Stranger, for example. We looked at a few Stranger combos, and it was clearly evident that you were paying for quality Strangers, let's say. There were some Strangers which were very, very questionable. And there was some that was very, you're like, wow, no, that's a Stranger, So it'd be interesting to see, like, there's a theory going around. Justin mentioned to me that, because I asked Justin, why are some Strangers like this crazy, amazing looking, and then there are some which are very questionable. And you look at them and you go, "Is that mahogany, or is it stranger?" Because I've got a great line of mahogany from Steve Walker and Kerry Stinson up in Scotland, and you can see it's mahogany. Yeah, and you could argue the toss and say, "Is it a very poor-looking stranger?" You know. Now, when I asked Justin, and I said, "Justin, what's the difference?" He said, "The crazy-looking ones, the ones that are very wacky, are potentially het moray." That's what he's seen. So it'd be interesting as and when potential moray testing, because that would be very interesting to see, is the difference between some of the strangers out there because it's het moray, you know?
Yeah.
That's going to be very interesting.
I think you're touching a great point there. So first of all, I think moray and monsoon is probably also going to be the same, but of course we will have to figure out with genetic testing as well. So I don't have enough sheds to start working on the test, but okay, hopefully somewhere in 2024. That's the first thing I wanted to mention. Secondly, I've had this discussion with quite a few people actually that have asked me about monsoon tests that have stranger animals that actually almost look like a monsoon because it's really pixelated on the sides,
Yeah.
and you can really see the monsoon pattern coming through. And I think that maybe not monsoon but moray, sorry.
Yeah.
But I think moray was actually coming from stranger as well. That's
Yeah.
the story that I heard. I'm not sure. I never talked with
Roland.
with Roland about this. But yeah, I've seen some animals also at Herman's facility when I was there. He showed me an animal and he asked me, "Do you have a moray test?" Because this animal, I mean, it's a stranger, but I mean, you can clearly see that it's not a regular
Yeah.
stranger. It really is. It's very pixelated on the sides, and it almost looks like a monsoon, even
Yeah.
though he doesn't have any monsoons or morays. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's going to be interesting. And again, even though there's a long list of sheds that you already test for or genetics, there is so much out there. And if it takes 3 or 4 months to do one test, I think you're going to be busy for a long, long time, Jurgen. I think you're going to get a lot of work coming your way. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. I mean,
So
that's to think about. To think about. I'm just thinking how the pennies dropped. All the genetics that we work with, all the genes, and how much work is involved. It's just going to be absolutely mind bending.
yeah. So in January, I will start developing new tests. I now have for many of these, I have more than enough sheds, and yeah, then of course it depends on what comes out, right? So there will be some that will be quite straightforward, like clown. It was very fast, and then there will be some that will require a lot more work, like Desert Ghost. And of course, it depends. Some I will have in March already, and some maybe by summer or maybe even in fall because it takes so much more work trying to figure out which one is actually responsible. For which one correlates
Yeah.
basically with the phenotype. Yeah.
Jurgen, a lot of appreciation for what you're doing, and obviously everyone else who's in the shed testing community. I know Danny Crosgrove over here, he does some stuff in the UK, but I really do, and the community really do appreciate your time and effort that you're definitely putting in. And if there is any way the Balls to You community regarding, the guys on the Discord or the Patreon can help, obviously we, Mac and Jordan through Jam Genetics can, any questions, please ask Jordan and Mac. And obviously, if there's any tests that we can help you with, Jurgen, regarding a different sample tests, we're more than happy to help. That's for sure. And I think that I speak for the community when I say that. I really do.
Yeah, I think First of all, thanks a lot for all those kind words, and thanks a lot for the help. It's really appreciated. And again, I mean, the community is. I always knew that the ballpoint community was great, but this, I mean, it really blew me away how everyone wanted to help me. Yeah, it's really absolutely been amazing. So thanks a lot for that.
No
But then
problems.
I think what I also should mention is that if you give me sheds and I use them to develop, yeah, a new test, let's say, if your sheds have been part of the developing process, then of course we can be sure that I can detect that lineage. Let's say for Ultramel, like the example we've been giving a few times already. If you have different Ultramel lines, and I get sheds, hopefully I'll be able to pick up both of those
Yeah,
ultramals when I develop the test. But for some reason, maybe I only get ultramal A or maybe only ultramal B. And if you give me your sheds, then it's more likely that yeah, I will be able to develop a test for your ultramal line, right?
yeah,
So it's also good for you guys if you help me out developing those tests. Yeah.
100%, definitely. Jürgen, stay there. I'm just going to say good night. But Jürgen, thank you for all the information you've shared tonight. It's been truly inspiring, truly educational. My brain is hurting, and I think many people who've been listening in their brains, but that will have to go back and definitely watch this. Jürgen, where can we tell us your social media? Where can people find you on social media?
So of course I'm yeah pro Herper, so you can find me on Instagram, YouTube as well. I try to post some videos, especially about the genetic testing and also some animals. And then yeah, the regulars, Facebook. I also even have TikTok, and I'm not so active on TikTok anymore.
Yeah,
So yeah, all the socials, Facebook of course, and then the website, which will be renewed as already mentioned, probably by February, something like that.
looking forward to that. I
So
think what we'll do, we'll get you on probably February, March time for round two, and I think
that would be great.
we can once my brain stopped hurting. MJ Pythons is saying his brain's ready for more. I know everyone's going to go back and rewatch this, as for sure.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So there's maybe one more thing I wanted to mention, and that is that, I mean, we've been discussing the genetic testing, of course, now, but in the background, and I cannot really give you too much information, but in the background, I'm also working on other new tools and new ways to improve this hobby. So you'll be seeing a lot more from me in the coming future. That's for sure.
Amazing.
So it's not only going to be the genetic test, but yeah, you'll see. I'm working on a lot of stuff in the background. So
No, that's brilliant.
voila.
Yeah, brilliant. Jürgen, thank you. I appreciate it. Just stay where you are. I'm going to put you backstage.
Yeah,
But thank you again for everything. Really do
yeah.
appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Gavin, and thanks a lot to everyone here. Also for the kind words, and hope to see you guys soon at a live event, even who knows. And talk.
Yeah, we'll drag you over. So there you have it, guys. Jürgen, what an amazing guy. Very informative. Um, just knowledge after knowledge after knowledge. I wanted to bring this live to you guys. I know it's a Friday night, and you guys have probably got lots of stuff to do. But hopefully, if you're rewatching this, you'll appreciate that. You know, this is something that I want to bring to the Patreon. Very different stuff. I'm happy to get suggestions. If you guys feel you want to speak to a certain person around the world, we need to get them on. Gav, let's have a chat with them. Then please feel free, hit me up. I'm more than happy to get on requested guests, let's say. Next week, I think we're going to do one or two live on the Patreon. One of them is definitely Meet the Breeder. This man doesn't know it yet, but he's going to be last run for Christmas. Liam from Snake Station is going to be on. He doesn't know it yet, but he is. He did volunteer. So we're going to have Meet the Breeder next week. Liam, I will link in with you and work out a date and time. Everyone is just absolutely screaming from the rooftops. Please come again. for Jurgen, which is great. We're definitely going to get him on for a part 2. Like I said, we'll probably do it sort of February, March time. So get Christmas out of the way and we shall jump on that. So guys, thanks again for all your support. I love and respect you all. Hope you've enjoyed this live. Guys, take care. Have a great Friday evening. And we will see you all definitely in the next one. Take care, everyone.